Good evening. Today is the Land Use Committee regular meeting of Wednesday, May 20th, 2026. I'll ask everybody to introduce themselves. I'm Jay Rosapepe, Port Orchard City Council.
Scott Diener, Councilmember 3.
Shira Dedman, council member, position 6.
Nick Bond, Community Development Director.
Jim Fisk, Principal Planner.
All right, we have a published agenda and we also have an item D added, Givens Park Master Plan update. There was also an email that was sent out sure, you can talk about that when we get to that since you're on that committee. Um,
I didn't, well, I mean, I could still talk about it, but I guess I just read it, but um, I noted that I didn't attend. It's noted in the minutes.
all right.
So, yeah, I had an emergency come up. And so that was the reason why, I guess, well, Jim had already suggested that Director, it's weird, I was gonna say Director Dennis. That Dennis was going to present. And so I ended up responding that that was a good idea, being that I wasn't able to make the meeting.
Actually, it's item B, so we'll get to that and see if there's anything we want to discuss on it. So the first action was survey results on the code efficiency.
Yeah, so we'd hope to give you the results of, well, let me back up. The Land Use Committee directed staff to coordinate with the Planning Commission to kind of prioritize some of those suggestions. We sent out a survey to the Planning Commission at the beginning of April, held it open for the entirety of the month, and plan to share those results at the May Planning Commission meeting. However, only 4 of the 7 commissioners finished the survey. So we allowed the commission to, either hear the results as we'd collected them or to reopen it. They chose to reopen it. We've had one more response since then. Survey will close at the end of this month. So hopefully we can share those results with the Planning Commission and then update the Land Use Committee in June.
All right, fair enough. Well, that brings us to the Givens Park Master Plan update. If there's anything that anybody wants to discuss besides what Dennis did send out to us. Does anybody want to add anything to that?
Just for clarification, when this item came up, I asked the committee if there was any objection to putting it on the agenda, and hearing none, I did place it on the agenda. In the email, I did mention that Dennis Ryan would not be available. Ms. Stedman responded that she'd be able to present. So I apologize that we can't have a presentation today.
Yeah, I think from what I read, it was you had to look into whether he would be able to present because he might have a scheduling conflict. And so that was at the time when I said I would be able to present, and then came back and said, oh, it's great that that was the plan. Anyway, doesn't matter. Let's talk. We can go through. I do have some points that after reading the meeting minutes that I thought the reason why I mentioned this is because I thought that Director Ryan was going to be on this call. And I wanted to mention that I do have concerns that I guess we may I when I read the meeting minutes, I didn't see any mentions, or I think that when we were first having conversations around the park, we didn't have any idea that we were going to assume this whole larger park too, and everybody was trying to fit everything sort of into a wish list into this park, even if it didn't necessarily make sense. And now we have this other park, Veterans Memorial Park that the city now has, which it makes way more sense in terms of sports. Plus,
We,
I'm
we,
a
we don't
stakeholder in
have,
the neighborhood,
yeah,
and the neighborhood.
Cheryl, we don't
Uh-huh.
have Veterans Park yet. That's.
Oh, I know, but
Future.
in
It's
terms of people trying to fit everything in it. And then I think that there was like the budget. So in terms of like people, I was supposed to be there and represent the neighborhood. And like I said, I had an emergency come up. So I'm a stakeholder as city council person, but I'm also the person that lives in the neighborhood. I've been talking to folks in the neighborhood, and I'm actually the one that suggested a pump track. And people don't want it because, especially because it would take out the grove, and everybody does want the grove. The people want the grove, which is like, the shaded wooded area. And so I definitely need to sort of walk that back. It's not a good, it wasn't a good suggestion. And definitely listening to the community. I definitely need to walk that back. I
well
think,
at a 30,000 foot level right now, because this is not until this is presented to the land use committee. Right now, this is basically, what's happening with the master planning, not going into it in detail about the discussion about what the committee is doing, because when they come to a resolution or a presentation, that's when we'll be taking a look at it. So I was looking more for a 30,000 foot level look at this.
I
Not
know,
a,
I guess I was starting to ask questions because I was reading with me minutes. I wasn't expecting to give the presentation. Um,
That's fine. I mean, basically they've met once. They have several concepts that they're looking at.
yeah.
One
Oh,
you
turf,
discussed. So,
turf. So that's another thing. But you're saying we're going to have that conversation with the committee because a lot of issues have come around turf, and none of them seem to be mentioned in the meeting minutes. But again, we would talk about that in the committee. So you're right. We'll just deal with that later.
okay. All right, because there's another meeting on June 11th, and I also noted that I didn't realize this, that Eric is also on the committee from the finance side of the coin. I didn't know if you had seen that or not. So,
Me? Oh, yeah, I know Eric's on it.
okay, I didn't know that. So that's fine on that. Does anybody else want to add anything to this? That's, the report again is everything that kitchen sink that, are concepts. And I'm sure as the committee continues to meet, more information will come out before it comes to us. Nick or Jim?
I haven't been involved in the project, so I've got nothing to add.
Okay.
And oh,
I guess we could talk about it a little bit more later, like you said, after I guess the next meeting, and I guess a lot of this stuff can be brought up at the next meeting. That's a good idea. That's a good idea, Jay. Thanks for bringing that to my attention.
Okay, update on the legislative session.
Yeah, so this last session, there were three bills that the city that will need to do some amendments to our municipal code. And I'm looking for my notes and I'm not finding them. But there were three bills, one to do with religious organizations and density bonuses when they're providing affordable housing. That bill has a 90-day deadline on it upon receipt of a request from a religious entity. If they intend to do that, we need to adopt the code within 90 days. So that's kind of the highest priority of the three, just so that we have it in our back pocket and we're ready to go if and when that occurs. The second, really wish I could find my notes here.
You back up on that for a minute, Jim, on that one.
Yes.
Is this, I assume then this is for lack of better words, when you say affordable housing, are we looking
Correct.
at basically small houses?
It could be something like that, yeah.
Have we had any interest? I know there's been one church, I think it was First Lutheran, that had talked about this before years ago, but I didn't know if there was anything that had been coming to you or Nick at least from a discussion standpoint on this.
I've not seen anything. Nick, are you aware of anything?
No, I'm not aware of anything either. And I
Okay.
don't think our code is so restrictive on density to begin with that somebody's likely to request this, but it's something that we will need to comply with nonetheless.
Yeah, the one thought I did discuss this with Carol Holman at Commerce. We have a form-based code, so we really don't have any ability to provide a density bonus that's contemplated.
Okay.
So, potentially if we had to do something, I suppose an increase in maximum height, building height, that might do it, but there's not a lot we can do the way our code is set up.
All right. Review process, permit review process.
Councilmember Diener has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Scott. I apologize.
That's all right. I wanted to say that I support getting this underway now because I think having to scramble to do it in 90 days it takes a lot of attention all at once versus our typical process for adopting code, which is a little more relaxed than that. And then I'll add that in the county, I'll say that there seems to be at least a few churches that are interested in subdividing and doing more with their land, is I guess how I will summarize that. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that, and maybe it's financially driven, but maybe it's because of a want to help people who are houseless. But I think we can expect to maybe see more interest in this even locally. So I think getting that underway right away is a good idea.
Mr. Rosapepe, there's two more bills.
Right.
So we did some work last year, in the last 18 months or so, about permit processing that was mandated by the state a few years ago. This newest bill it has a deadline of June 30th, 2027. And so we need to do some additional tweaks in regard to permit processing. The most significant one that I see so far is that we have to have one individual who's kind of responsible for residential projects. That person is also the SEPA responsible official. So we're making that the second priority just because of the deadline. And then the last, House Bill 2266.
That's what I was speaking.
I'm sorry I've got them mixed up. That's 27.
1859, sorry.
Yeah. And then the 27 requires us to do some work related to that pardon me, the permit processing. House Bill 2266. I'm sorry, I'm having some problems today. We did some work on this in the past too. This has to do with permanent supportive housing. That's due in 28. So that's kind of the lower priority at this point. So we introduced these just generally in the director's report to the Planning Commission at this month's meeting. We're introducing them as a package similar to what we did with Land Use Committee tonight. At the June meeting, the Planning Commission will receive all of the bills, and then we're going to separate them and take action on each one separately. And so over the next year or two, that'll be in their work plan, and you all will see it periodically.
Do any of these impact the comp plan?
No.
Okay. The only reason I asked that question was just the updates that come through, and I didn't know if there was anything that crossed paths with the comp plan. Little naivety on my part. Sorry.
Nothing that would require anything to do any amendments or anything to the comp plan, but we do rely on the comprehensive plan for the permanent supportive housing, the actual units that we're required to accommodate.
Okay. That kind of ends our discussion items, but I do have one, and somebody's going to have to refer. I know that you were there last night at the meetings, so was Scott. Sure. we had a little bit of a discussion last night about when we were talking about our upcoming town hall about zoning and districting. I didn't know if you wanted to, have a little bit of a discussion about that, regarding, downtown, how it kind of crosses over. So more for an educational point for us. Uh, on the zoning side, Nick, if you can kind of remember part of that discussion last night.
Well, I remember the discussion last night, and the city attorney had made a suggestion that I could potentially do a presentation on kind of zoning comp planning 101. But do you want me to get into specifics of our downtown zoning? And
Well, it was more of, just that we had we were talking about, I got the feeling about, how would somebody go about, you know, uh, we've had two items come up in the last 6 months about zoning changes, whereas you mentioned we hadn't seen that in a long time. And it was more of just saying, hey, is this something that not as an issue, but is this something where from an educational point that we should be a little bit more familiar with, or is like, no, you just take it as it comes along and go from there.
well, it's true they don't come up very often. I think maybe there have been four total rezones since I've been with the city. So it's a pretty rare occurrence. It was unusual that we had two of them right in a row here this last year. With that said, our development regulations, the zoning code, the zoning map have to be consistent with our comprehensive plan. And our comprehensive plan includes a land use map, and it creates broad categories without designating specific zones. One of the things that has occurred to me, and um, I think we have to balance, do we want to make it possible for people to request rezones, or do we want to make things very rigid? But I believe Kitsap County actually adopts their zoning in their comprehensive plan rather than having kind of the umbrella commercial zone and then five different commercial districts that can be designated under that zone and which can be changed via rezone. Scott, if I'm not mistaken, I believe the county, in order to change your zoning, you have to file a comprehensive plan amendment because the zoning map is part of the comp plan. Is that correct?
Well, that's not how we've been operating, but we have been discussing that as a legal concern.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
So we're thinking about somehow addressing that through, this is a representation of what was in effect as a zoning map at this time. Trying to dodge that a little bit so that we can do those umbrella rezones without having to change the comprehensive plan land use map or the comp plan itself. And then we've got those other umbrella to umbrella zone changes, the site-specific amendments, which do in fact change the comp plan
Yeah,
land use
yeah.
map. We don't face that as much here.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, if it's the city council's desire to make it harder for people to rezone property, the once a year comprehensive plan amendment process, you have to submit an application before January 31st. It gets processed according to the schedule of a comp plan amendment. And then there isn't this quasi judicial rezone that goes to the hearing examiner. So the city council could create an amendment and actually put the zoning map into the comprehensive plan. But you're making it much more difficult for zoning changes to actually take place year to year. But that may be something that the council desires. And so up to this point, we've had this quasi judicial rezone process so that you can change your zoning within the umbrella of either commercial or industrial or high density residential or medium density residential. And there are multiple zones that you can shift between in some cases. Under that umbrella. So there are things the council could change if they wanted to make this part of the comprehensive plan rather than something that goes to the hearing examiner. But generally, I think things come up from time to time, and being able to go from commercial heavy to commercial mixed use or commercial mixed use to commercial heavy probably makes sense if economic development opportunities are brought to the city and somebody wants to seek that rezone. It's a lot faster than waiting for the once a year opportunity to amend the comp plan. And if somebody comes in February and has to wait a full year just to file their application and then has to wait another 6 or 8 months for the city council to and the planning commission to work through that process, that's very time consuming compared to the 3 or 4 months that it takes for a rezone.
Well, you talked about the industrial side of it, and I got the feeling from listening to my fellow council members that and Scott, I see your hand up this time, sorry. That it was partly, did we want to have a discussion because of the density? That's the one that's come up in our last two rezones. And, it's sort of not comes what's first, chicken or the egg from my point of view, but, we're getting pushed on density by the state. And at the same time, how are we trying to maintain, for lack of better words, what we have in Port Orchard? So I don't have a magic wand. I was just bringing this up for discussion. Scott, you got your hand.
Yeah, so I personally am not too keen on making it more difficult for people to accomplish the rezones that fit under the umbrella. So I think we've got the umbrella change to another umbrella designation that has got to go in the comp plan process. But I don't know that these more simpler rezones need to become more complicated than they already are. However, what I'd like to do, and this is kind of kicking the can down the road, is the next time we have a rezone request application, in advance of any hearing on that, I'd like to have a work study with the board, sorry, with the council, so that we can talk about the criteria by which those rezones are evaluated. And for example, there was a lot of discussion about what is substantive change as one of the criteria in the rezones. And I think it would be good to have a discussion about what that means so that we can inform each other a little bit. We didn't really have that discussion. We couldn't have it, during the time, but we haven't had it since. And I think it makes sense to have it in the future, but only when we see one coming again, because again, these don't happen that often. That's my 2 cents.
Shara, do you have a comment on this?
Yeah, I definitely a work study to discuss it more. Um and also making a change like this, you know, I guess what that getting, community input and what folks think about this would be, like how to go about that would be really interesting.
Jim, you got your hand up, and then I got a comment.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to Nick's point about incorporating it into the comprehensive plan that could make it more difficult. I mean, what we've seen recently is people trying to accommodate a specific project. We have had rezones in the past where they have a single family home in a commercial district in the commercial umbrella. Now, there are some commercial districts that allow for single family homes and others that do not. And when it does not, it's a non-conforming land use and structure. And so lenders are sometimes reluctant to lend on projects like that. And so if a house were to burn down or something like that, our code, you can only rebuild it if it's less than 50% of the valuation at the time of destruction. So if somebody had a non-conforming single-family home in a commercial district, they would not be able to rebuild it. So there are occasions where that rezone is helpful in finding a solution to a problem like that. So in case somebody's house does burn down, they can rebuild it.
Fair enough. So my question is, and Scott, you got your hand up again. You want to go first?
Yeah, I just want to say I support what Jim is talking about. I think that a bit of a detour there. I think that's necessary to have. We've had this discussion in the past, but it's a different council. And I think it's important for everybody to understand what decision making we go through when somebody wants to rebuild a non-conforming structure, or they want to add on to a non-conforming structure. I think those are important discussion points that we don't really think too much about until somebody comes to us and says, "Hey, I've been told I can't do this. How come?" Um, and so we've talked about, solutions in the past, like maybe no greater than a 10% addition. Um, and I don't think that made it into code, did it? Yeah, okay. So I think that is probably something to consider in the future as well. I'd like to see that on our list of things to talk about because it can be quite devastating for somebody who can't rebuild on their property because they're not conforming and also quite impacting in the context of trying to house additional people in your family in your house that's also a non-conforming structure, especially this day and age.
Right.
My 2 cents.
Yep. Well, the reason I was bringing this up a little bit was, it was good, start of a good discussion. We've had a good discussion here. Is this something that we would want to have the planning commission take a look at initially, come up with a recommendation, and then bring it to council for a work study? Is that not in their wheelhouse, Nick or Jim?
Well, it's in their wheelhouse, but I think they have a bit of work to do in front of them right now. So I would suggest if council wants this to be kind of added to the work plan, that we docket it for 2027 and put it on the kind of to-do list for next year.
I'm good with that because of the fact that, it ties in comp plan and, well, it seems like that's a long ways away. In 2027 seems closer than what it seemed to be just last week. So I'm okay with that. Scott, Shura?
I'll lower my hand here. When you're talking about punting to the planning commission, are we talking about the non-conforming code or are we talking about the zoning code or rezoning code or
I was,
process?
I was looking at the rezoning code. I think the other one we might be able to address sooner. Am I wrong on that one, Nick?
Well, I was thinking the rezone criteria specifically
Right.
that
Okay.
Councilmember Diener had mentioned.
Right. Yeah, I was looking at the other one, that Jim had talked about. We might be able to address that ourselves.
Well, maybe before we punt to the planning commission, we should, um, as a group here, decide whether we want to punt that to the planning commission and confirm that with the balance of the council. I'm not sure we want to make changes. Do we want to make it harder for somebody who wants to contemplate a use that, for example, might be better economically, use a better economical use of their land, or might provide for some density and try to help lower cost of housing? I don't know that we want it to make it more difficult. I think there's a series of tests that they've got to pass. I think we need to do a better job of understanding those tests ourselves.
So do we want to send it to, well, the planning commission, if they have their work, then this would be something that we would be looking at first at land use. I wouldn't take this to full council at this time. I don't think we need to take a look at it ourselves and, come up with a recommendation to council.
Yeah, I guess my vote is no change. But would love to have an education about the criteria that we discuss when we look at a rezone, just so that when we put into a situation of an appeal, um, we'll have had education going into that.
Hey
Okay.
Jim, why don't we have one of our assistant or associate planner put together a memo that looks at how the Port Orchard's criteria for rezone approval compared to other cities, and just type up like a couple page memo with some attachments, and and let's start with just gathering some information.
Yeah, let's put it on the June meeting docket for us, if that'd be acceptable to the other two members of the land use committee, and we can have that discussion. I would like to keep that separate from what we were talking about the non-conforming. I think Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, and Jim, that's something that we could tackle also, but as a separate issue. Am I incorrect on that one?
Yeah, the non-conforming topic is a separate issue. I need to go back and look because I feel like we had some discussion about this in the last couple of years, and I feel like we maybe got some legal advice on
Yeah,
that.
I was gonna say we did, and that's why we didn't advance it. And so, but
Okay.
we did, you're right, Nick.
Okay, can we bring both subjects up in our June meeting then?
Okay.
All right, is that okay with Sharon, Scott?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, anybody else want to bring anything else for the good of the order right now?
Well, the last item on the agenda, I think, was our next meeting date.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So June, that's why I said the June meeting. So
Well, and I believe that I am going to be gone for our June meeting and our July meeting dates. And so Jim and I were talking about the possibility of consolidating our next meeting into sometime between our regularly scheduled June and our July meeting date, if we can squeeze it in. Otherwise, Jim could potentially host. I think, Jim, do you have an absence as well on one of those dates, or were you available for both of them?
Um, I think I'm available.
Okay, so you could keep it and go forward without me, or if you'd like me to be involved, I could probably squeeze it in maybe the 8th of July, which is the day before I'm leaving on vacation.
okay, so you're talking about combine the meetings for June and July to the 8th of July?
Yeah, which is 1 week before our scheduled July meeting and 3 weeks after our scheduled June meeting. I could also
Okay.
do the first, but it feels like that's kind of going into the holiday weekend, and I don't I don't know how many people are taking off.
First is a Tuesday of July.
I thought it was the first was Wednesday.
I'm sorry, it's Wednesday.
Yeah.
Sorry, looking at the wrong
So
calendar.
I think the holiday is the third because the fourth is on a Saturday, so it's a rare Friday holiday.
Okay, we have a meeting the 7th of the regular council. Um, July 1st would work for me. Would it work for everybody else?
Let me check one more thing. Forgot the World Cup is on, and I did manage to get some tickets. I don't
There is
remember
a
if they're
meeting that day. There is a match that day.
on the 8th or the 1st.
First.
Okay, the first I have tickets to. I'm wondering, I think I have tickets on the 6th also,
Yep.
but not the 8th.
There's no match on the 8th.
Perfect. Okay, the 8th was the day that works for me.
Okay. Does 8th work for everybody to have our combined meeting on that day?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, then we'll move the meeting to the combined June, July meeting to July 8th. Please note it and please let the clerk know so we can update it. Anything else for the good of the order?
No, that's all. Thank you for accommodating my schedule.
No, no problem. I think it works for everybody. It'll be a pretty healthy meeting though. A lot on the docket. So, okay. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.